Awesome. Thank you, Zoe. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Wow, big crowd. I'm super happy to see this many people here. For those of you that have been here the last couple of weeks, I was not, and I apologize for that. Some other things in my life going on, and I appreciate the grace and flexibility that everyone's been able to offer and help out with this. So thank you again for being here. Today we have academic CVs with a co wonderful colleague of mine, Dr. Brian Hand here at CU Boulder. Brian is our graduate student program manager in our career services. Um, Brian's awesome. Brian holds degrees in exercise physiology, organic chemistry, and chemical engineering. So he probably fits a lot of boxes for a lot of you that are out there as well. As usual, I always want to offer this to folks like, for those looking for additional support and things like that. We don't want to necessarily overwhelm any of our folks here, presenters and such. But if you ever want to connect with me on LinkedIn or something like that, I tend to to meet with folks in Joyful Journey series every year, about other things too. So if anyone is in this space and you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please go find me, WF Preston Cumming at CU Boulder. One, it helps me grow my network, but it also helps me maintain connections with you all too. So if anyone's interested along this series, please reach out. Super happy to have this as our third session, and just know I'll be in the Q&A, kind of monitoring that, helping out. So if you got questions, throw them in there. I'll pass them along to Brian if I can't answer them over on that side. Sometimes it gets a little overwhelming there, but we do our best, and know that not every question is something we might be able to answer, but hopefully I can give you a good idea or a thought or something like that, as well. So with that, 5 minutes in, I'm going to turn it over to Brian now. And once again, Brian, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Preston. Thanks for the introduction. I'm gonna share my slides with you all. Cool. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. As Preston said, my name is Dr. Brian Hand, and today I want to talk with you about CVs for the academic job market. Um, Preston already shared a little bit about myself, so thank you, Preston. Uh, But I just want to add that I did work in academia. I was an assistant professor for 6 years. Did earn a promotion and tenure, but decided to change my career path. But I certainly am familiar with that process and certainly want to share with you today. So here's our agenda. We're going to just talk briefly about what a CV is, some of the formatting guidelines, various sections of a CV, and then customizing your CV for specific jobs that you're applying to. All right, so the CV, it's your opportunity. It's a document that presents who you are as a researcher and scholar. And I did indicate comprehensive because CVs, they're unlimited in length. I mean, my CV was somewhere between 30 to 40 pages. I've seen longer. Most likely at this stage of your career, it's probably around 2 to 5, but I've met with graduate students here at CU Boulder who've had longer. I met with one student recently who had an 11 page, so she's off and running with her CV for sure. So I'm going to share. I just want to highlight a few specific, very helpful tips along the way. And the first one, not that all of this information isn't helpful, but there are some key tips along the way that I want to share with you. And one of them is the fact that CVs in general, there's a few basic formatting rules and guidelines for content. But after that, it's just kind of fair game. So my recommendation to you is try to get copies of CVs from recent graduates from your department who are in academia. Those can be really good guides for you as to um, how you format your CV, what headings you should use, what content you want to include in your CV. So that's one of my key tips for today is get copies, get access to those CVs from others in your discipline and in your department. So, in developing your CV, you're going to be writing about your experience through what's referred to as the academic triad lens. So, in that lens, we're focusing on research, teaching, and service. I mentioned the length of a CV. It can be unlimited. That's differs from a resume, at least in the US, where resume is usually like 1 to 2 pages. CV, as long as you want. That being said, we'll talk about how you want to customize your CV to help you really highlight the unique contributions, accomplishments that you have specific to positions applying to that are relevant. So, in talking about your experiences, and we'll talk about the different experience sections in the CV, but in talking about those experiences, we can use either a paragraph type of format where we have sentence fragments, or we can use bullet points. And again, you might want to check with what's the convention for your discipline or your department. In CVs, we're focusing on experiences, but we're also focusing on those end products, the publications, the conference presentations, the grants, and so on. Okay, so I want to share with you all a few basic formatting guidelines. So the first that I'll talk about is margins. So you want to have equal margin sizes all the way around on your CV, and those margin sizes can be 3/4 to 1 inch. You want to use a common font that's easily readable. So my suggestion is Times New Roman. There's other ones that you can use, but make sure it's legible. And most of your text should be a font size of 10 to 12 point. I would say the bulk of your text should be 10 point. You don't want to go smaller than 10 point because then it becomes difficult to read. The various sections that you have, let's say it's education, research experience, those can be a bit larger, like 12-point font. And then in a future slide, I will also share with you that your name should be even a little bit bigger. So with items in your CV that you want to highlight, let's say it's section headers like education, I recommend bolding those and putting those in caps. You want to make sure that you have a balance of white space and text in your CV. I would avoid text boxes, underlining, and shading. If you use italics, I would use it in moderation. Avoid pronouns, personal pronouns, minimize the use of articles like the and an. Be careful with jargon. Make sure that it's appropriate to the audience. that you're sharing your CV with, who's reading your CV. And I've mentioned the last bullet point a few times. But I want to finish up this slide as with formatting, saying that you want to be consistent with your formatting throughout your CV. Okay, so another key tip is when you are applying to positions, be thoughtful as far as the headings that you're using, how you're titling those headings, and also the CV, it's an unlimited length document, but is someone who's reviewing your application, reading through your document, are they going to read through all those pages? Most likely not. Um, but most likely they're going to pay attention to the first page, maybe the first couple pages, but certainly the first page. So my recommendation to you is most important information on the first page. So for example, if you are applying to a research intensive institution and you have several publications, especially first author publications, it would be to your benefit to have those on the first page and more towards the top of the first page. Maybe it's under your education section. And usually I recommend education comes right after your name and contact information. So you want to make sure your most important information is standing out, even though the length of the document is unlimited. And you also want to be concise, be relevant, even though there is no page limit. So develop your CV so that it really highlights the value that you bring, your accomplishments. We're going to talk about different categories such as research experience, publications. And so you want to list the items in reverse chronological order. That is the most recent first. Okay, on this slide, I'm sharing with you the sections, the section headers that you might have in your CV. So certainly you want to have education section, research and teaching experience, service. You might have a research and teaching interest section. Certainly you want to include publications, conference activity or conference presentations, and references. Now, depending on your situation, your experiences on the position that you're applying to, there might be other sections that are relevant to you. And so I've given some examples here that you might include in your CV. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of these sections now and what to include, how to format them. So we're going to start out with um, the first section, which is your name and contact information. So your name should be bolded, and I would recommend using a 16 to 18 point font for your name. Then include the physical or street address of your department, an email and phone number at which you can be reached at. And then it depends on your situation, like your discipline, the position you're applying to, what else to include. So you might include URLs for like a GitHub or a professional or portfolio website. Certainly, you could include your open researcher and contractor or contributor ID, which can be a hyperlink to like your publications. And then you might also include professional social media such as LinkedIn, but again, that will depend on your discipline. All right, you should have your education section next. And here you're going to list your degrees in reverse chronological order. So your current degree or your most recently completed degree will be first. If you're still in process, you haven't completed that degree yet, I would include, I would just put expected and the expected year when you expect that you will complete that degree. And then you'll list your degrees using a degree first or institution first format. So in the example I provided, I've shown it as an institution first format. If it was degree first, PhD in history would be on top, and then University of Colorado Boulder underneath. I would be consistent with this format for your degrees. And when you are talking about your research and teaching experiences, keep a similar format for the location and the role that you have. So if it's like a research assistant position, you know, again, you can choose the institution for first format where you have the institution and then research assistant below, or you can do the research assistant on top and the institution below. You can also include the title for your dissertation or thesis, and then a brief summary, no more than 3 lines. So you might have started degrees and not completed them, or you might have other education experiences like study abroad that might be relevant to the positions you're applying to. So you certainly could include those in your CV in the education section. You would list those institutions and then the date range and type of experience. As far as honors, if you have a list that's somewhat short, you could include that in the education section. But if you have many awards, it's probably best to just have a separate section entitled honors where you are listing those honors. So I wanted to share with you a couple of examples of the header or name and contact information and education sections. So you can see that here in this slide, and then in this slide as well. So you can see kind of what that formatting looks like and the information to include. Okay, the rest of the sections that I'm going to talk about, even though that I'm talking about them in a specific order, these may not be in the same order that you have them in your CV. Again, it's going to depend on the convention of your discipline, and it's going to depend on the position you're applying to. Remember that we want to have the most important relevant information towards the top of the CV on the first page if possible. But I'm going to present them in the order that I have. And again, you can adjust as necessary. So the first section I'm going to talk about is research interests. You could combine this with teaching interests as well. And there are 2 different ways that you can present these topic areas. So one is in a column type format, which is shown on this slide, or you can just list your research and or teaching interests just in a list form separated by commas. So it can be helpful to include the topic areas that represent, your research experience, publications, conference activity, and that may be the same or it might be different from your future research plans, but it's helpful to include that as well so that you are showing that you are aligning with the institution that you're applying to, that your research interests match um, the current research or future research that they will have going on. All right, next is research experience section. So this would include doctoral, thesis, capstone research, basically any time that you've spent in a research assistant role. And you might have other projects as well that you may or may not include. What I would recommend is you develop like a full comprehensive version of your CV, and that might include all research projects that you've been involved with. And then as you are applying to specific positions, to tailor or customize your CV to the position you're applying to. And so there might be um, some research projects that you choose not to include because maybe they're not relevant to the institution you're applying to. So these experiences should be listed in reverse chronological order, including dates, the organization, your title, and then you can also include a brief narrative, which includes the following: a brief statement to provide context on your research. And then you want to describe your research activities. This could include some of the skills, the techniques that you've used, especially if they're relevant to the institution you're applying to. And then also including your findings and how you're contributing to your field. I would also include a result statement that includes things like a dissertation, a publication or certain number of publications, certain number of conference presentations, patents, and so on. So here's an example of formatting for research experience. So this is done in the paragraph format with sentence fragments. I'm not going to read through all of this, but you'll have these slides that you can access later to read through this. But again, you want to tailor these descriptions based on what you've done and what's relevant to the institution that you're applying to as best as you can. These are this is another example of how to present research experience. This is using the bullet points instead of paragraph format. The one additional thing that I would like to see with these experiences is including results and outcomes. So something else I want to make you aware of, and this is that certain fields are currently formatting research experience less as an explanation or narrative and more as like maybe a single line or maybe a couple of lines. So it's helpful to know if that's the convention for your discipline. And also as best as you can, what's the norm at the institution that you're applying to? Is that what the expectation is? Because it could be to your advantage to present it in the way that they want it or what's convention. All right, next, I'm going to talk about teaching experience. So this will include sessional and adjunct work, teaching assistantships, instructor positions. It might even include tutoring. So with the teaching experience section, it's important to pay attention to the requirements for the position you're applying to. And be aware that some departments, what they want in teaching experience is um, experiences in which you've been the instructor of record. And they might want like teaching assistantship or other work as in a separate section. So just want to make you aware of that. And the formatting is going to be similar to the formatting for the research experience section. So some key information that you want to include in the teaching experience, in teaching experiences are a descriptive course title. So including just like catalog numbers, that's not going to mean anything at another institution. So use descriptive course titles for the courses that you've taught and include your level of involvement as well as the enrollment size. So level of involvement, that might be developing lectures, office hours, signing grades, and so on. So I've provided a couple of examples, one on this slide for a single course. And then on this second example, it's multiple courses in which this individual taught, and they're providing a summary of their level of involvement in providing a range of enrollment for these groups of courses that they taught. So these examples are like for teaching assistant and instructor positions. I would follow the same format for adjunct and sessional work. Often visiting assistant professor positions or positions in which you are signing an employment contract are listed under a section called professional appointments. So next is service, and service typically falls under three categories: service to the department, to the university, and the profession. So I've provided you with a few examples under each of these categories. So service to the department could be, serving on a search committee, serving as a graduate mentor. Service to the university could be participating in graduate student government, serving as a graduate representative to planning committees. And to the profession, it could be volunteering at conferences, being a reviewer for a journal, being the graduate representative for your region to a professional organization. So in writing about service experiences, um, typically it's most helpful to have a broad title of what you did and then the date or date range. You might contextualize the experience, but usually the title will provide enough information. Okay, so earlier I mentioned that you might you might shift the various sections of your CV, again, depending on your situation and the institution you're applying to. And I gave the example on publications. So let's talk about publications. And so publications can fall under different categories like journal articles, books and monographs, and so on. Um, if you have just a few entries, it can be fine to just have a publication section and not have subheadings for journal articles, books and monographs, and so on. But if you have several in each of these categories, it might be helpful, it might be beneficial, especially to the reader, to divide them into these subheadings with each of these categories. You want to clearly indicate the stage of the publication, or you want to make sure it's easily implied. So if it's a publication that's, in press, that's accessible now, usually just including the citation is enough. I would bold your name to emphasize your contribution. You might have other categories of publications, which the publication is at different stages, such as work that's accepted but not um, necessarily published or available to the public yet. Uh, you could have work that's under review, so you could indicate that it's forthcoming. You can also have in progress work. Um, I would be careful with this. I would use this sparingly. I would not list a whole bunch of in progress work because there's the possibility that if you have published work or even accepted work, if you have a bunch of in progress work, that might really dilute the effect of having, publications or accepted publications. All right, next is conference activity. So typically this includes posters, oral presentations. It could include panels that you have organized and moderated. So similar to the publication section where I talked about how if you don't have a super long list, you might include all of these together. You could do that. However, if you have several entries in each of these categories, you might break them out into subsections so it's easier for the person reviewing or reading your CV to follow your work. So in these categories, I would include a full citation. I've listed what to include in the full citation in the bullet point. If you are just lumping all of these presentations into one section without subsections or subheadings, it can be helpful to have indicators. For example, if it's a poster, you could just put that in parentheses. If it's an oral presentation and you were the sole presenter, you could also indicate that. Here is an example of how to format your conference presentations. So you can see here the person who the CV is, they've included full citations. And then at the end, they've included whether it was a poster presentation or an oral presentation. Okay. And next is kind of my last key tip, and I've been alluding to this throughout my presentation, and that is tailoring your CV specifically to the position, purpose, or audience that you are sharing your CV with. Again, I shared this earlier it can be helpful in the beginning to just develop a full, like comprehensive version of your CV that includes details of all your experiences. Um, and then as you're applying, just make a copy of that and tailor it to the position you're applying to. And that might include leaving off some of the information. It might include how you title your different categories, your different sections, and it also might include how you organize your different sections. So, for example, if we compare applying to teaching a teaching position at a small liberal arts college versus applying to a research intensive institution, those CVs should look different. Uh, if it's teaching at a small liberal arts college, obviously we want to emphasize teaching experiences and we want to have a teaching experience section on the first page, ideally. If we're applying to a research intensive institution, then if you have, as I mentioned earlier, if you have publications, it's helpful to have them on the first page. Probably you would have your research experience like right under that. So you want to be thoughtful as far as how you organize, what you include in your CV when you are applying to specific positions. You want to pay close attention to the posting, the requirements. Definitely do your research on the department you're applying to. Um, Look for, if it's research, what research do they have going on? What techniques and skills would be valuable at that department? If it's a teaching position, what classes might you be teaching? Have you already taught them before? Have you developed a syllabus for a similar course in the past? That would be helpful to share. So these are some recommendations, some suggestions that you might consider in customizing your CV for specific positions you're applying to. Okay, so lastly, I want to share with you some resources. Again, these will be available to you in the slides that are sent out to you. So you'll be able to check them out for further guidelines on CVs, and definitely there are plenty of examples in these resources that can help you, especially in the situation that you're in, the discipline that you're in, and the types of positions that you are applying to. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share.
Hey, Brian, I've
And
gotten to a lot of them. There is one question in here I don't know that came from pretty early on about the use of articles, and I guess is a grammatical question, and I missed. It was pretty early on. I didn't catch the point of avoiding the use of articles, the and whatever maybe that's what they're alluding to, but I left it here because I was like, I'm gonna have to get back to that one. So if you have anything to say on that while I type a little bit on these other.
yeah, I would minimize the use of those. Um, so, for example, when you're talking about your experiences, you can use either bullet points or sentence fragments, and so minimizing like the and those types of articles when writing about those experiences. So hopefully that clarified and answered the question.
Yeah, I feel like I'm able to handle a lot of these, but it's good. If you see any in there, let's see what else we
Yeah,
got. Um, since you're here now and questions keep rolling in,
yeah.
um, we'll go to the first one here with Hannah. Professional experience section of my CV currently because I work jobs that are sort of related to my field but weren't research roles. Should I get rid of them? Should I repeat my research experience jobs in the professional experience section because they're both? This is a good question, I think, a lot of times because a lot of folks have maybe coming back to degrees from research,
Mhm.
which, you probably you have more to say about that kind of thing than I probably do with having several different um, uh, professional lives. So
hmm hmm Yeah, I just want to read through that question again to make sure
yeah,
I fully
sure,
understand.
sure.
Yeah. Okay, so Hannah, in answer to your first question, should I get rid of them? Um, the way that I would approach that is there, are there like skills, techniques, that you developed in those professional experiences that would be helpful in the position you're applying to? And if that's the case, then I would leave them in your CV. Again, the nice thing about a CV is, you're not limited for length, so you certainly could include that. Um, should I repeat my research experience jobs and the professional experience because they are both? I would not repeat. Probably I would just include them in the research experience section instead of in the professional experiences. It's possible that if you repeat them, that you might confuse the reader. So I hope those answered your questions.
Sorry, I'm getting through some.
Yeah.
Um, what else we got here? Yeah, I think a lot of things we've seen so far, or I've been typing on, is a couple times this has come up too, in terms of funding. I have like an awards, grants, funding kind of
Yeah.
area in mind,
Yeah.
and this is always a sticky point. And we'll get to another sticky point I put in here too. Sticky point in terms of amounts. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was very proud of that $100 that I got from the Rocky Mountain, hiking club.
Right,
Uh,
right, right,
but I
right.
didn't put it in there, but I put my NSF grant in there and put that
Yeah,
amount
yeah,
of
yeah.
money. So there's I always try to tell folks too, like you probably do, like, I mean, what do other people do in my field? And that's always I'm sorry, everyone in this space, like it's a default of mine of like, what are other folks in mechanical engineering doing? What are other folks in aerospace? What are other folks
Mhm, mhm,
in
mhm.
English literature? Like, what are other people putting in there that kind of helps it? I personally, at the time, I was like, I put everything in there because as I went a younger academic,
Mhm.
in my career, I'm still young, y'all. In my career, young academically, I was proud of everything I got. So I always put all
Mhm.
that information in there. But the further I got away from that award, I started to leave some of those things out. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Right, right. Yeah. Um, and I know it's not always easy to do, but as best as you can, if you can put yourself in the shoes of, you know, being a member on the search committee and, what's going to get their attention because they're gonna review a lot of applications and Um, I think being mindful of like, yeah, what will stand out to them, and also being mindful of their time. Um, I think if you, and again, it's Preston, as you said, it's something to be proud of, but if someone on a search committee is seeing a bunch of, several things like that, I don't know if maybe, hopefully it's not happening, but maybe they might lose patience with that application because yeah, that's nice, but you know, that isn't really that significant to us or important to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two more things.
Yeah.
Publications. And again, I see both ways, under review, unpublished, how that looks like. It looks different in different fields and it looks different for different people.
hmm
If personally, if I haven't finished it, if it hasn't been published yet, I don't put it in. But I know other people, if you're already limited in the number of publications you have or might have,
Right,
it
right.
does help you feel like you're filling something out.
Yep.
I worry though, you know, I would don't know if I would rather see a 2-page full or a 3-page um with- or a 3-page with a lot of soon to be's or maybes, you know, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I agree with that. As I mentioned, I mean, it can be detrimental. Like if you list a bunch of work that's in progress, um, yeah, that could potentially hurt an application. And it's as I mentioned, it dilutes. Like if you have work that has been published, it could dilute that. Um, So yeah, again, keep in mind who's reviewing your CV, what what's important to them. Um, I mean, certainly accepted. I mean, certainly I would include that. Um, I mean, I do like to include under review because it shows that, you know, most likely you've got a good solid, you know, you got a good solid manuscript. And hopefully it's just going to be a matter of, not too much time that you're going to get that work published. Um, but yeah, I agree. Having a bunch of in progress work is probably not helpful.
um, I guess, and you talked about this a couple different times, and I'm going to preface this to everyone in this space too, the 259 that are still here. What I talk about in the Q&A, what Brian talks about in his slides, what you're going to get from your own career services folks, what you're going to
Mhm.
hear from your own PI, your own advisor, your own colleagues in your departments. We all have different thoughts and opinions and feelings and hundreds and thousands of these that we've both seen. And like there are so many ways to write all of these things.
Mhm.
Something that I usually say at the beginning is this is like, go talk to your PI, go talk to your advisor, go see what's going on in your field is really going to help you say, okay, I have 3 ways I've been thinking about this, from these 2 folks in here, plus, my people on my own campus. Now
Mhm.
let's see what people are doing to get a fourth opinion. Really, it's unfortunate, but it is. There's a vibe that comes with this too, right? I have a personal preference of what I like to say and what I like to put out there. Um, my best anecdote is during my postdoc at University of Vancouver or University of British Columbia in Vancouver, I worked. My children were there, and one of their best friends' father was a professor, and we would always sit down and just talk because he knew I was going to be on the academic job market soon. And he said, Preston, he knew I liked to run and he was a big triathlete. And he said, what's your PR for the half marathon or whatever? He knew that I was working on that at the moment. And I was like, why does that matter? He's like, I want to see that on there. And I was like, well, that's weird. I would never do
Mhm.
that. But this guy, faculty member, ran his own company, did all this stuff. He's the person that's reviewing these for his own lab, his own work. And he wanted to see that. And so that was Carl, his name was Carl. That was Carl's preference, but that wasn't my preference. And so y'all, if you feel like this is really relevant, this service, this publication that's going to come out soon, this conference paper, this K-12 work that you're in now, I'm going to go back and answer that one. But like all of these things, if you feel like it's strong in your application for that position, for that role, for that department, for that college, for that area, even of the country, of the universe, then put it in there. No one's going to ding you for including something that you felt necessary for this. Yes, we want to we want to stand out in some ways, but no one's going to tell you, oh, I'm going to move you off that pile because you put your personal record for the marathon on there, Preston. They're going to be like, well, that's interesting, but they're not going to necessarily rip it up and throw you out the window. So what feels appropriate and right to you isn't always what's going to feel appropriate and right for someone else, but we're all in this together. And so getting all of these ideas is only helping you navigate how you want your path to go. Joyful journey, y'all. What else was I seeing in here? Um, a lot of formatting, you know. Oh, sorry. The other thing was when you were talking about teaching experience or research experience, you know, how much narrative to put in there versus a list of bullet points. What do you see? Do you see more like explanation of activities or less, you know, or is it 50-50 for you?
Yeah, I would say 50-50. And again, I think it's helpful to see what others in your field are doing in writing about those experiences. Um, yeah, that would be my recommendation. You also, with those experiences, I would keep in mind, what's going to get the attention of your reader, the search committee. So again, are there specific skills, techniques that you've used that are relevant to that department? Um, Certainly you would want to include those. Um, and certainly contributions that you're making to your field, your discipline. That's helpful to be including.
Yeah. I put in here that, you know, sometimes as we both see in jobs in more of the well, academic adjacent is what I like to call myself, you know, in many ways, because
Mhm,
I get to
mhm.
do these things, but I'm not necessarily in a department, although I'm a lecturer in my geography department. But it's there's the use of AI and stuff and screeners in HR. Do you hear much of that in terms of relevancy for academic positions, faculty positions? Because I do and I don't. I'm not sure where we sit at CU Boulder, but is that something that you hear about in terms of academic positions?
I haven't, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised though. And I say that just because of just the volume of applications that institutions are receiving, and the fact that um, you know AI is used a lot in application materials, and I could see, certainly a search committee being concerned about that. Um,
I would
so
say probably less so. I wouldn't put it past them because it makes life easier. But but I think in terms of faculty business, personally, it's your fit. It's
it's
all
your
of these other
right,
things too. You know, running your CV,
right.
they might run your cover letter through it to make sure that you're, you know, meeting all of the things. But y'all, we present so many different documents when we're on the academic job market to for these positions that I think it would be virtually impossible to do that, you know, or not relevant. They leave a lot to academic departments. Much more so than they do to us in our offices and fields. So, have you seen too many? I like this question. Too many, very many like templates for CVs.
Um, yeah, good question. And I believe in one of the resources that I shared, I think they have a template that you can follow, as a guide. Um, Again, I think it's helpful to again get samples from those in your department. Um, I know when I was developing my first CV, yeah, I got an example. Um, I was handed, I think it was like a 20 to 30 page CV. And it was helpful for me in developing. Granted, mine wasn't as long, but I could see how it was laid out, how it was organized, what was included, and that was very beneficial to me.
Cool. Um, Somebody asked a question about, I keep meaning to get back to this. Moving from K-12 space into two-year colleges, what should we emphasize? No research, no publishing, no conferences, just a degree and years in K-12. Whew. Not having all of these other sections. And to this person, this anonymous attendee, um, first of all, thank you because I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, um, and there's a lot of ways that I think semantics in terms of how to frame some of that stuff. But what does that look? What do you think that that looks like to for someone? If we say if we're taking this person and we're trying to present it in a CV, what are your thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah,
I mean, how is it different than than industry back into academia? Maybe it sounds. I mean, it's a similar transition
yeah,
with different
yeah,
words.
right, right. Uh, yeah, I'm just thinking. I mean, I think it depends on the institution. If this fits under like a teaching experience or maybe it's a professional experience. Um, I would I would recommend, as best as you can, follow kind of the guidelines that I gave you for teaching experience. And um, I mean, it could be bullet points. It could be, a paragraph with sentence fragments. Again, talk about your level of involvement, talk about your enrollment. Oftentimes, that's what institutions are looking for, as far as teaching experiences. But use the posting as your guide. Like what are the requirements, responsibilities, in trying to fit those, align with those as best as you can from your K-12 teaching experience.
Awesome. Sorry, we're at time, aren't we? We could just keep going, y'all. We're 100 down than where we were. So people are like, I got what I needed. It's time to go on. Yeah. Oh, GPAs. So this personal information, last little thing,
Yeah.
professionalism of putting your university address on there, really helpful. People know you're in the world, in their world still. But
Right, right.
GPA, photos, like what about those types of things?
I would say no. Yeah.
And last thing, someone put, a table of contents at the top. I've never seen that, but someone asked about this in here. I've never
Yeah,
seen a
good.
table of
Yeah,
contents.
good question. I have not either. I don't think you need a table of contents
I would imagine, sorry, if it's something you're keeping like in Google Docs and it helps you
to
like
organize
add
it.
one digitally to then get
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
but
yeah.
um I'm still not seeing a whole lot of like e-portfolios and e-CVs and stuff like that yet. I think
Right.
it's still on the resume side of things, maybe more often to be a little bit more with the times. Academia is
Hmm.
still antiquated in lots of ways, y'all. Even though we're the ones doing the research and pushing everything forward, the way that we interact with one another still feels like we're in the 70s and 60s and many 1800s sometimes. Okay, Scott, that's exactly it. Go and find people that are doing things in your discipline, in your field, in your area, the go-getters, the heavy hitters, those people that are widely known. See what their CV looks like. Go and mimic it. Go and make it yours. That's what I did, and I still have the same one, same format that I've always had. And for everybody still here, I'm happy to look at these for you too. So again, LinkedIn, find me. I can I do it. I do it all the time. So I'm happy to be a second pair of eyes for you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brian, so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you, Preston. Thank you, Zoe.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the recording off here.